Worldwide attention. What you're about to learn is one of the most tense naval incidents in the modern Caribbean. A torpedo launched by mistake, an aircraft carrier on its route, and 3 seconds that could have ignited an international conflict. Subscribe if you believe the United States acted correctly by not responding with fire, because many argue that this restraint prevented an irreversible escalation. Stay, because this episode reveals how a miscalculation, an obsolete radar, and a faulty interpretation can push two nations to the brink of confrontation. At dawn over the Caribbean Sea, near the edge of Venezuela's exclusive economic zone, OS, operators noticed something unusual on their radar screens during routine patrols. It was a faint, diffuse movement beneath the surface, ambiguous enough to raise suspicion. The sonar picture was no better. Scattered signals, loose echoes, nothing that matched a defined contact. Unbeknownst to the United States, 2 Venezuelan submarines were already moving quietly through the depths, closing in on what they believed was a lone amphibious ship traveling without escort. For Washington, that sector of the Caribbean was calm. But the developing approach told a different story. Someone was deliberately moving toward the formation. What Venezuela perceived as an opportunity to pressure a single U.S. vessel was, in reality, an unintended approach toward a fully armed carrier strike group led by a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. As the American formation advanced with the confidence provided by layered sensors, escorts, and coordinated surveillance, no one on board imagined that another navy was misreading their presence. And this raises the core question behind the incident. Could a torpedo fired as a warning based on faulty information have come close to triggering a naval confrontation between two nations? If you want to understand how this near crisis unfolded and why small mistakes at sea can have global consequences, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss upcoming analysis. The situation escalated once outdated information reached the Venezuelan submarine crews. The report they received described a large U.S. ship sailing alone near the maritime boundary. But the radar reading was several hours old. When data arrives with such a delay, the target's position, speed, and identity can no longer be trusted. The submarines, however, could not verify the information. They were under strict emissions control, with active sensors shut down. Their mission required a silent approach from below the thermal layer, forcing them to rely solely on the incomplete data provided. Both the 21 Bolivar and the 23 Sucre, diesel-electric submarines capable of extremely quiet movement for short periods, advanced using underwater terrain and temperature layers to mask their acoustic signature. As they moved toward the indicated position, they began hearing strong, irregular noises from the surface. The sounds traveled forcefully through the water and matched what they expected, a U.S. vessel performing routine deck operations, such as helicopter movements or equipment checks. They reduced speed further to minimize their acoustic signature and estimated distance using sound alone. Once they believed they had reached the edge of their engagement zone, they prepared their weapon systems. Diesel-electric submarines are commonly used for coastal defense, and their crews trained to send firm messages without starting open conflict. That training motivated their decision to launch a shallow-running torpedo, typically used as a warning. The 21 Bolivar prepared the weapon, set a short-distance run, and released it into the water. Modern torpedoes produce an unmistakably acoustic signature at launch, impossible to hide even beneath thermal layers. That sound spread, quickly signaling a turning point in the incident, not for the weapon itself, but for how differently each side interpreted it. For the Venezuelan crews, it was a controlled warning shot. For the U.S. Navy, any torpedo launch is treated as an attack, regardless of depth or fuse settings. That divergence transformed a tactical misread into a crisis. Aboard the carrier strike group, the atmosphere changed in just a matter of minutes. What had begun as a routine transit suddenly shifted when the destroyers positioned on the outer defensive ring detected a faint, irregular signature beneath the surface. It was a subtle pattern of cavitation, tiny vapor bubbles formed by a submarine's propeller blades spinning at speed. The signal was weak, fragmented, and far from definitive, yet unusual enough to raise immediate concern among the sonar teams. One of the destroyers reduced speed to lower its own acoustic footprint, allowing its towed array to capture a cleaner, more detailed image of the water around them. In situations where a single uncertain indicator appears, U.S. NAVAL protocol requires ships to adjust formation and velocity to improve detection accuracy. These refinements help distinguish harmless background noise waves, marine life, distant engines from mechanical signatures associated with hostile underwater movement. As operators continued filtering and analyzing the data, a new sound broke through the static. The unmistakable acoustic burst of a torpedo launch. It was sharp, sudden, and left no ambiguity. Within seconds, the strike group shifted from routine navigation to full combat posture. The aircraft carrier immediately altered its course, pulling away from the torpedo's projected trajectory. Escort ships widened their spacing, creating a more effective defensive perimeter around the carrier. Destroyers activated their acoustic decoys devices, designed to mimic the noise of large vessels and lure incoming torpedoes away from the formation. At the same moment, the carrier's air wing received the alarm. The MHS Centaur Seahawk, the strike group's primary anti-submarine helicopter, began rapid launch procedures. Outfitted with advanced dipping sonar, sonobuoys, and MK-50 E4 lightweight torpedoes, the aircraft stood ready to take to the air and expand the group's surveillance reach. Airborne sensors can piece together patterns that surface-based systems may miss, making the helicopter's presence crucial during any underwater threat. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tension intensified. Operators watched as the torpedo completed its short-programmed run and detonated. The explosion generated a shockwave nearly identical to the terminal blast of a hostile torpedo that fails to strike its target. On sonar, the pattern was clear and sequential. 2 underwater contacts approaching mid. A torpedo launch, a powered, linear movement, and final explosive, pulse. Each element aligned perfectly with the acoustic profile of an attempted attack. Analysts quickly reached a sobering conclusion. The strike group had been deliberately targeted. Any torpedo detonation near an American carrier is treated as a high-threat event. The resulting pressure wave can distort sonar readings, temporarily blinding sensors and masking additional weapon launches. This uncertainty added urgency to the situation. The destroyers and the cruiser repositioned themselves again, preparing for the possibility of a second, more dangerous strike. Meanwhile, commanders reviewed engagement protocols, ready to authorize defensive fire. Surface ships verified the range and readiness of their anti-submarine rockets. Air crews prepared their MK-50 E4 torpedoes for immediate deployment. Under United States naval doctrine, a torpedo moving toward a protected asset is justification for lethal defensive action. But before giving the order to fire, senior command made a critical decision. They would wait 3 seconds. 3 seconds to determine whether another torpedo was inbound. 3 seconds to decide between restraint and escalation. It was the narrowest window imaginable. But in high-pressure naval operations, those brief moments can determine whether a situation stabilizes or spirals into open conflict. During that moment, operators scanned for the acoustic signature of an active torpedo. Had it appeared, the defensive attack would have been immediate. It did not. No signs of another threat were detected. The conclusion: the torpedo had detonated at the end of its programmed run and was not part of a continued attack. The root of the crisis lay in Venezuelan radar failures. Their outdated systems couldn't separate multiple ship returns. For 2 days, operators saw a large, unstable echo that appeared and disappeared. They believed it was a single massive vessel near the boundary. In reality, it was a full U.S. carrier strike group, a carrier, destroyers, a cruiser, and support ships fused into one radar blob due to equipment limitations. Caracas assumed it was an amphibious ship operating alone, interpreting its presence as potential pressure or surveillance. The U.S. Navy, meanwhile, had no idea it was being misidentified. Today, the Caribbean looks calm, but beneath that quiet surface lies a question no analyst dares ignore. Was it prudence or mere luck that prevented a direct clash between 2 heavily armed nations? 3 seconds, a misread torpedo, and a strike group that chose not to fire, a razor-thin line separating history from catastrophe. And now it's your turn. Did the United States act wisely by holding back, or should it have responded to send a clear message? Was this an unavoidable error, or a warning that next time things may not end so well? Share your thoughts in the comments. This debate is just beginning. And remember, in a world where a single sonar echo can trigger a war, staying informed is more critical than ever. See you in the next analysis.